Hello and welcome to another 10 minutes at 10 where we're going to be getting the most out of Xero. So previously in this week we have covered reporting, so we've looked at profits and loss report and balance sheet, but today we're going to look especially at the budgeting component of Xero. So the first thing is, why might you need to use this tool and why should you be considering using it? Well, there's a few reasons really. The main one is forward forecasting. So it's handy to have a budget in place so that you know what your targets are and you can review when a month passes, you can see where you're at, but it's also handy to know where you're going to be heading through the financial year as you go along. So we can do rolling forecasts with this. We can get partway through the year and have 4 months which are actuals, 8 months which are forecast, 5 months which are actuals, 7 months which are forecast, etc., to give us a picture of where we're heading in the way of profit, where we're heading in the way of corporation tax, and most importantly, for the profit element of this, how much dividends we have available to distribute if we're a limited company and we're paying ourselves through it via dividend. So really value adding here. It's not just a backward thinking tool, it's also a forward thinking tool. But as well as that, it can really help you understand your actual costings and your incomes when a month end passes, and you can compare it to budget as well. So lots of benefits to this one, and I'm just going to share my screen so you guys can see what we're working with. So once again, in the lovely demo company who kindly lends its services to us. So firstly, where do we find budgets? Now, I am just going to quickly show you actually, when you're in a profit and loss report, just as a classic example, you may notice that when you do compare periods, there is the option to compare with previous periods, but there's also the option to compare with a budget. So you can review against what your results are expected to be and what your results actually are. But when I click on this overall budget, where has this originated from? Now, this is what we're going to be looking at so that we can use it in our reporting. So firstly, I'm going to accounting and reports because I want to see every report available. And the budget manager is rather, a little bit inconveniently, not an option you can actually favourite. But I'm hoping they change that in the future. But if we click into this, we have the option to manage our various budgets. And I say various budgets because at the moment, there's the option to select a budget, and I only have the one set up, but I can add a new budget. And there's no limit to how many budgets you can add. So you might have one which is worst case scenario and one which is best case scenario. Now, the worst case scenario is a really good forward forecast because it basically means, right, I'm partway through the year. What happens if the absolute worst happens? This. I've still made profit. Thank the Lord. That's a result. And also it can be helpful to see best case scenario as well. So you might have different scenarios for this. And likewise, you might have a budget for different management teams. So you might have one which is for I don't know, an overall director, and one which is for, say, someone who's a sales consultant who might have a slightly smaller budget where you don't want to give them quite the same depth of information. So to start off, I'm just going to add a new budget, and I'm going to do a worst case scenario on this one. Now, there is the option to assign projects to this one because actually you might want this budget to only relate to, say, Project East. So you have a budget for Project East, you might have a budget for Project West, etc. Really helpful. But this one's going to be an overall budget where it's the whole business as a whole. So at the moment, what we have is we have a start date and we have basically a few fields in black. Now, these ones are fields which represent actual results. So we can't edit these fields, but the fields which are highlighted in blue are those which we can. We can, of course, change the start date of our budget, but as I've got a year end, which is, say, March 2020, I will want to start this in April, so I have the full financial forecast. I might decide I don't want to show actuals because they're confusing me, but actually they're quite helpful for giving you a forecast figure. And also you can set the budget. So you can set 2-year budget, 12-month budget, entirely up to you. I find 12-month budget is usually plenty. So I'm going to work with a 12-month budget here. So there's a few ways we can edit this budget. At the moment, I've got nothing in any of these fields. So in the way that Xero works, very helpful. We can edit these fields in blue. So I can either edit them one at a time and custom make it, or I can be crafty and with these green arrows, I can expand them out. So it might actually be that the worst case scenario isn't that I make £1,000 worth of consulting sales. The worst case is that I just have a retainer for £1,000. What if I make no sales outside of that? So I might apply a fixed amount for the month. And this will carry forward to all of the months afterwards, up until the end of my budget period. Likewise, if you want to show growth and you say, okay, I've got a little bit of work in IT support. At the moment, it's not much. Starting off, say £100, but I want this to grow. So what you can do is you can have this grow month on month rather than having to manually key into it. I can set it to increase by, say, £100 a month. I might have it change by a percentage per month. So really handy. I'm actually going to have it increase by £50 a month. And what we can see is we've got an incremental increase on our income. So for my worst case, I've got my retainer and I've got a tiny little bit of growth, but really I want much more than that. So this might give me an indication of where my income is heading. And likewise, if you want to change anything, you can do. If you know for a fact you have a contract lined up for like July 2019, you can overwrite the figures as you wish. Now, the one thing I will say with budgeting is the best way to get value from it is to have multiple levels of income streams and multiple levels of cost of sales, by which I mean manage your chart of accounts, add some detail to it if you haven't already. If I've just got a single sale line, it's much harder to add clarity and detail to my budget because I can't necessarily isolate what my income is made up of. So really handy to have it split out into more information. Now, just going to build on from this. So in my budget, I'm just going to add a few blanket costs. I'm not really sure what I'm going to add in, so I'm just going to literally apply some of that. So let's have some, I'm not going to have any general expenses. My rent might be £500 a month. Going to apply that fixed amount. And let's have a look. See, printing and stationery, I might spend like £50. As you can see, clearly well thought out figures. So one thing I will say is when you do this, please do think out your figures, work out where you're heading. And what I would do is, this is probably not the best example, but like with light power and heating, it tends to fluctuate a little bit. Obviously my light power and heating is pretty consistent here. So what I would do is use an average for stuff like this. If it varies, use an average of like the last 3 months, because then you've got a realistic picture. If it fluctuates seasonally, obviously adjust for that in the trend. But I'm just going to apply light power and heating as £90. Doesn't have to be perfect. I don't have to fluctuate at 87, 92, 96. Just an average is fine. So we can actually build up our costs quite quickly doing this method. Now, at the moment, what I have is, I'm actually just going to zoom in just a tiny bit. I probably should have done that at the start, thinking about it. So what I have is a set of results for April, May, June, and I can see that my net profit is being calculated. And because my sales are slightly increasing each month, my net profit is getting progressively a little bit better. Now, the reason this is really helpful is for a few reasons. Because when I actually look forward, I'm just going to get rid of my actuals. And one thing I'm going to recommend actually is whenever you update the budget, click save. Because of the way Budget Manager works in Xero, it's designed so that you have to just make sure you save it every now and again. It does have an automatic save, but out of paranoia, I recommend using it as well. If you've got lots more fields than this, you can export it. So what I would do is export it as a CSV, edit the figures. So you might have like a template file which you've already got mapped out. You can just paste the numbers over the top. Then save the file and import it. But I would always export CSV first because then you've got all the formatting, you've got the headers, you've got the dates, you've got the account codes. So export first as a CSV, edit, and then import is the best way to do it if you've got lots of account codes. But it's up to you. You might feel more comfortable doing it this way. You might feel more comfortable exporting it. Entirely up to you. But now the important part is I have a whole period of 12 months where I've got forecast, and I can see that my net profit should arrive at £7,320. Now this is really important because if this is my worst case scenario and I have corporation tax to pay of 19%, I know that I'm just going to round it to 20% to make it a little bit easier. But say I have £5,000 net profit after paying tax, I know how many dividends I have available to draw, which is really important from a cash perspective because it means, one, am I retaining the cash to pay that dividend? And two, if my profit is only that, that's what my dividend is restricted to without becoming an overdrawn director's loan account. So do I have reserves from prior year? is that enough money for me? And if the answer is no, we want to push our results harder. So we want to push harder on sales, or maybe actually we want to start trimming back on costs. So both ends of the spectrum, you can trim back on costs, but also sales are massively important. So I'm just going to save this budget, and I'm just going to return to my profit and loss report. Now, as I mentioned yesterday, we had the old report, which is this format, and we have a new report, which I'll show you separately because you can use the budget in slightly different ways. So, old report, I'm going to have a look at the show date range, and I'm going to compare it with, oh, sorry, wrong period. Compare periods. I'm going to compare it with my worst case budget, and I'm just going to refresh that. Now, one thing I will say when you do the budget is it doesn't compare previous periods on this view. It will literally just compare the month you're looking at versus the budget. So what you'll get is you'll get the actual, you'll get the budget, and then you'll get what's called the variance and the variance percentage. So it's just literally the differences between the month. And obviously green is a positive boost and red is a negative impact. So basically if your costs are higher, you'll see a red. If your costs are lower, you'll see a green because it's a benefit to your business. And most importantly, you'll see your year-to-date results for your actuals and your budget. So really handy little tool here because we can actually compare how well we did against our worst case scenario. So very handy for a backward thinking view, but also this is the part where it gets really clever. I'm going to go to reports and I am going to drill into the profit and loss new report. And I am just going to literally change the period to last month and update that. Bear in mind, I would have set up formats for this before, but because it's demo company, it resets. So if you're doing it normally, all of your settings would have saved. Mine won't have because Xero Demo does refresh very regularly. I'm just going to edit my layout. Now, this at the moment is a month which I've set to August. What I'm actually going to do is be a little bit clever with what I do. I'm going to add a column and I'm going to add July. I'm going to add another column for a date and I'm going to add June, etc. So you can see what I'm doing. And imagine I go back, in fact, actually, let's do it properly. Let's say my financial year starts in April and I'm in July now, just as a little example. What I can actually do is put my July budget in. And likewise, I may put my August budget in. So what we have is a load of fields where we've got actual results and we've got budget results. And I'm just going to add a formula at the end because this is the most important component. I'm just going to put year to date. And all I'm going to do is literally take all of my fields and I've literally gone into this, just so you know, because I did this a little bit quickly. I went into columns, did formula, added a column, and then all I've done is in this formula, I've gone insert, and I've added the fields which are available here. Add, insert the various fields. Now what I'm going to do is visualize I've done this for the full financial year. So I've got 3 actual periods and 9, I don't think about that, 9 budget periods for my forward-thinking case. Now, what I'm going to do now is you'll see, now this is the really important part. Firstly, I will say, when you put your budget in, use the right budget when you change this. At the moment, I've used it as the overall budget, but I want to actually use my worst case. So I'm just going to change these both to worst case. Luckily, I don't need to change the formula because it still recognises the fields. And what I have now is a visual representation of my, say my financial year is April 2019 to March 2020. What I have is a set of actual results followed by a set of forecast results. So what I have is a cumulative year-to-date figure. So when each period passes, I can forecast where I'm heading. So when I've got all my July results completed, all I need to do is firstly save the report, and then all I need to do when July period passes is, this is obviously based on a budget figure which is set in stone. What I'm actually going to do is July has passed, I'm going to edit this layout and I'm just going to go into July because I don't want that, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a column for dates. I'm going to ping July over here. I'm going to delete the July forecast figure because I now want to base it on result. Now the year-to-date figure is going to go, we're missing something because I've just removed a field. So I'm literally just going to delete that reference, add July in. So now I've got actual forecast. And I'm just going to click done on that. So now what I have is a really, really value-adding report, because this is what we call a rolling profit and loss forecast. Massively value-adding, because all of a sudden, every time a forecast period ends, we're replacing it with our actual results. So our year-to-date figures are going to change. And most importantly, we can forecast what our corporation tax should be. We can forecast how many profits we have left after our corporation tax is taken into account. So basically, how many dividends can we take? And importantly here, we could also have salaries, etc. factored in. So it's massively, massively value adding from a P&L perspective. So really recommend using the budgeting functionality within Xero. You can add so much value. You can do forward forecasts, you can do historical reviews, and most importantly, you can set various different scenarios. So you can have worst case, you can have best case, you can have, if I employ this staff member, the costs will increase by this. If I employ this consultant, the cost will increase by this. So you can have staggered forecasts and scenarios. So really, really helpful. So I recommend having a good play around with this, see what budgets you can implement. And then, of course, if we've got budgets, we can monitor costs, we can monitor income, and of course we can plan for dividends and corporation tax. So it is literally just dream come true if you have this working the way that you can do. So basically give you a bit of an idea for what you can set up. But this one I've used in a few clients, it's lovely, and you can actually do it for personal tax forecasting as well if you know how to use the budgets and how to set it up, because you can have your actual results based on, say, payroll data, and you can forecast what your payroll data is going to be in the future, and you can plan for personal taxes. So it's absolute bliss. So I hope you guys have found this useful. I hope it's given you some ideas on some of the stuff you can look at and some of the things you can set up in Xero. And just remember, if you are using this report format, you do need to click save, and you do need to save this, I would recommend, as a custom report so you can access it later. And just as a quick pointer, if you ever need to access a custom report, all you need to do is go into accounting. In fact, actually, I'm just going to save it. So actually I've got the new demo. I'm just going to save that. So if you ever save a custom report, you can find this by going to accounting, reports, and along the top, there will be fields for, basically, we've got all financial, sales, etc. Won't be down here. It'll actually be in these top headers. So we can drill into custom. And this is where our P&L with the forecast is set up. And the good part about this is I can also favorite it, so it drops down in my list. So that's how you access a custom report if you're ever doing this method. So I hope you guys found this useful, and I hope to see many of you trying out the budgeting tool within Xero and applying it to your business. Massively value adding, really recommend it. If, of course, you do have any queries, in fact, actually, if you enjoyed this video, please do let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear. And if you do have any queries also, please feel free to let us know in the comments. And I hope you found this useful. And I hope to see you again with our next set of Xero hints, tips, and how to use it. We'll be doing a few of these, so I hope they're all useful. Thank you very much, guys, and take care. Bye.